Welcome to Rich on the Road Across America.
Hey there, this is Rich. Welcome back to part 2 of Lucille's wintertime tune-up. The last video we replaced the coolant. That's why the gas tank is missing off the bike right now. We replaced the coolant in the system. Now we're going to move on to replacing the clutch plates inside the motor. If I open this up, it's going to pour oil all over the floor. So we're going to drain the oil out of the case first. Then we'll remove the pipes. Then we'll take this side of the engine off to access the clutch plates. Let's get started. Hey there. To drain the oil from a VTX, there are 2 drain plugs. One on the front of the engine case, and then another one underneath and toward the back of the engine case. They are 17 millimeter bolts. So we're going to take the socket wrench, unscrew them, and let it drain into our catch basin. Since the bike frame sits so low on this side, I've got a Rubbermaid 6 or 8 quart container that I used. It catches all my oil. Just don't tell Mrs. Don't You Dare, because this is the same container that she puts cupcakes in. That's a joke, by the way. So the oil's drained. Remember, we're not changing the oil just yet. I'm just draining the crankcase so that I can open up this side and get the clutch plates out. To gain access to the clutch plates, several things have to happen. One is that the exhaust pipes have to come off all the way back to the engine. First, there are 2 12 millimeter bolts that hold the back end of the pipes to the frame right here. I take those 2 off. Then there's 2 12 millimeter bolts at the head of each pipe. I take those off. Then there's a series of 5 millimeter Allen heads here. Another series of 5 millimeter Allen heads here, and then there are a few 9 millimeter bolts that hold the side plate to the block. So I take all of that off just to gain access to the clutch plates. To help keep track of where everything is, I've made up a little stencil of the engine. This will allow me to take, as I take a bolt out, to plug it into each one of these holes. That will keep them in the right order. Some are going to be longer than others, so they need to go back in the same order they come out. So this will help keep me straight. Two 12 millimeter bolts, washer, and nuts. Now we'll take off the bolts on the front end. 12 millimeter also. These are little button caps, nuts, on top of posts coming out of the block that hold the head of the exhaust on. We're now at the back of the engine. Here's the rear exhaust. I'm not gonna lie, taking those exhaust pipes off took a little extra work. Didn't get it all on video because I was frustrated and working too hard and didn't want you to hear all the bad words. What happened was the footboard, the support on it was in the way, along with the brake pedal, along with the highway bar. The pipe came down and was hitting right in this area and had no room to pull out. It was hitting all these supports. So I had to take 3 or 4 bolts out here to loosen this entire housing up, allow it to fall away from the bike a little bit, to allow me to pull the pipes out. But the pipes are off. The little rings are still in the housing right here, so I'm going to try to dig out some little hooks. There we go. This is the front, this is the rear. There's no difference between the two, but that's the 2 crush rings for the exhaust. Now I need to start removing the Allen head bolts on the clutch housing. I'll be careful at the end. I don't want this to fall off. Hit my jack stand down here and scratch it up. "12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. There we go. That's how I'm gonna keep track of it. Here's where I'm supporting it so it doesn't fall off. It may not fall off. The gasket seal may be holding it. It may actually be a little bit difficult to get off, so good old rubber mallet. It's off. Outer housing of the clutch. Now I'm going to remove the forward chrome housing. Now we've exposed the actual crate cover, and it has a series of 8mm bolts all the way around it, holding this onto the block. So I've got my 8mm wrench. We'll go around and first just loosen them all, and then I'll come and start taking them off. These are the main reason I built the diagram. These are definitely different lengths, different sizes. So I'm going to make sure to get them in the corresponding holes so that when we reassemble, we've got the right bolts in the right holes. So let's start taking it apart. There we go. All my bolts filed away for the correct placement. There is a sealant gasket around the edge of this, and it's holding this on, and I really can't pull it off. So what I'm gonna have to do is to go around the back side of the engine, put a piece of wood in here, use a hammer and kind of knock it loose carefully so that I don't just knock it off into the floor. So let's give that a try. So that broke it loose, and there's some oil. If you can see it draining out the bottom. Good thing I put that cardboard down beforehand, anticipating a little bit of a mess. So let's pull this the rest of the way off. Let's see what we got inside. Okay, so now we've got the housing off and we're ready to get access directly to the clutch plates. I have no clue what I'm doing here. Now we're ready to remove the clutch bolts and retention springs that sit behind them. It is a 10mm bolt, so we'll go through. I'm going to go on a crisscross pattern to loosen them, just get them loose. And once I get them loose, I'll take them off in any order. There's nothing specific to any of these. They're all the same size, same length, same threading, same spring. So there's no need to try to keep them in any certain order. So you got the tension spring and the bolt and a washer. And that holds all the plates together in tension. A person much smarter than me would have used a drill for that. Oh well. That allows me to remove the pressure plate and a release rod. And now we have the clutch plates, and this is what we're going to be replacing. Well, I got the MTC VTX clutch kit. It comes with all the plates, new springs, and some new washers. The part number is CLU VTX 101. And recommendations are to soak the plates in oil for at least 24 hours. So I'm gonna get an oil bath, put the plates in for at least a day, and then we'll work on installing them into the clutch assembly. Got some Honda oil here. We'll make a little bath. Flip up the package. Take out the plates. Just drop them in and let them soak. That should do it. We'll let it sit overnight and then we will put the plates on tomorrow. So first order of operation is to remove these friction plates. There are little notches, cogs, whatever you want to call them, on the plates. And on the outer hub, there are fingers. These cogs fit into the fingers, which hold them into place. So we're going to systematically remove friction plates and steel plates. Friction plate, steel plate, friction plate, steel plate. I believe there's 8 of the friction plates and 7 of the steel plates. To remove those one at a time, I'll need to use a little hook as we get deeper into the outer hub because your fingers can't grab a hold of them. So we're going to start removing those and get ready to replace them with new ones. There we go. The new friction plates have been in an oil bath for 24 hours. These are the steel plates that I removed. The last plate that I removed from the clutch housing was a friction plate, so we're going to put a friction plate in first. There is no front or back to a friction plate. They have little friction pieces on each side. So we're going to place the first one in. And then put in a steel plate and repeat that process. Friction steel, friction steel, friction steel. And that's it, a really simple process of replacing them. The hardest part is just taking everything off and getting back to it. Now it's time to replace the pressure plate, the new springs, and this kit comes with new springs and some shims. It's recommended to put 2 shims in first, then put the spring on, and then place the bolt to compress the springs. Specs state 9 foot-pounds. That's 12 Newton meters, but I'm doing foot-pounds. I have my torque wrench set to 9 pounds, so we're going to reassemble. Put 2 shims in each hole, place the springs in, put the bolts on and tighten them down by hand. There's no tension at all on these. The springs are still loose. Now I'm going to take a 10mm socket wrench, tighten these down pretty tight, but not to torque yet. And then I'll put the torque wrench on it and finalize it down to the 9 foot-pounds. I'm going to be going in a crisscross pattern so the tension is applied evenly on the plates, but not pulled down on one side more than the other. So tightening by hand, I hit a point of manual stoppage. They kind of just stop turning easily. Now with the torque wrench on, I'm going to tighten it down to the 9 foot-pounds. Just taking my time, easing up on each one in the crisscross pattern so I don't get any uneven tensioning. You know, as you hit 9 foot-pounds here, it takes a little pressure off of this one or this one. So you keep going around and around in the crisscross pattern until you get the 9 foot-pound pretty evenly as soon as you start to crank on it. There's a little prep work that needs to be done before we put the case back onto the engine. One is you have to come through and clean off all the old sealant that was on here. Really important to get off as much as you can, all of it. Then you want to come back to the engine and get all of the old gasket seal off of it, making sure you're not dropping chunks and pieces down into the engine. Then I'm going to come along with some acetone and clean the surface of each piece. Make sure there's no finger oil or any debris on the surfaces so you get a good bond between the two pieces. Then I'll come back with Honda Bond. Now Honda Bond has nothing to do with it being a Honda bike or a Honda car. It's just another gasket sealer. Put it on super thin, making sure you have no breaks in your bead. That's the key point. Thin is fine, but no breaks in your bead. If you put on too much and you push the two pieces together, it'll squeeze sealant out. Now on the external, it's just unattractive, but we can live with that, we can clean it up, but that's not really the important part. If it's squeezing out, it's also squeezing in toward the engine. Any sealant or gasket that goes to the inside of the engine can break loose, come loose, and start circulating through the engine, through the oil system, and you really don't want that. I know it was on fast forward, but you may have seen me picking and pulling down inside the case housing here. I cleaned out the excess oil earlier with some paper towels and pulled the old gasket off. And as I was cleaning with acetone then, I saw that there were some little giblets, little pieces, slivers of old gasket and some pieces of paper towel in there. So, you know, yes, there's an oil filter and it's going to catch some of that debris. Anything I can get out of here beforehand is just less stress on the engine. Now I'm getting ready to put the sealant on, and there are two rims to this cover. I'm going to show it to you. There's this rim and then this rim. This one doesn't need sealant. This one does. Now there are times when the two intersect, like right here, there's only one rim, and that will be visible to the external. But I'm only going to put it on the internal rim, as that is the face that matches the engine and will be the part that needs the sealant that'll hold the oil in. So let's get the sealant on here and get things moving instead of talking all the time. That took some time. It was like decorating a cake. It's really thick and hard to get out of the tube, and I was using a very small nipple on the end of it, so I wanted a small bead on here, but I've got the bead on here. I let it sit for about 5 minutes, which is what's recommended. Kind of gets a little tacky and hard. Kind of becomes a rubber gasket type of feel. We're going to place it onto the engine and start bolting the bolts back together. I've got my socket wrench ready. I'm going to start putting them in the order that they came out, because these are different lengths. So let's get started. So we've got all the bolts back into the primary housing, the crankcase primary housing, and tighten them all down to 19 foot-pounds. So that wraps up the clutch plate replacement on Lucille's wintertime tune-up. We did coolant number 1 and then clutch plates 2. So the next step is the exhaust crush rings. So thanks for watching, and hope you stay with us through the winter, and we'll get Lucille back into running condition. See ya.
I may be poor, but I'm rich on the road across America.
I have no clue what I'm doing here.